The LA Thieves recently signed what many people are considering to be a super team. With that title, a lot of people think that they might not be able to beat Optic or FaZe. With this topic being spread around, I want to dive into that deeper and explain why I think the Thieves will actually be better than what people are thinking. I'm joined by a very special guest today. He is a co-host of Around the CDL podcast. He runs his own YouTube channel where he talks about everything CDL and everything Call of Duty. He's also a big Thieves fan just like myself. I'm here with Jake Maverik. How's it going, Jake?
It's going good, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate having you here. Excited to talk about the Thieves. Obviously, as I said, you're a Thieves fan as well, so should be a lot of fun. The thing that I wanted to talk about today is there's been a lot of discussion with the Thieves being a super team, right? That's what everybody's kind of starting to say.
Buzzwords, we love them.
Yeah, but with that, people are kind of throwing out that, hey, we don't really think that the Thieves maybe can beat Optic, or maybe they can beat FaZe. So I really just wanted to kind of discuss why I think the Thieves are going to be better than what people are giving them credit for. And I know that's a big ask because obviously with the likes of the name super team, you know, it's obviously a lot of anticipation around this team already. But I had some ideas and some talking points on why I think this team will be better. And I wanted to start off with, for one, I think this team, for like, obviously the talent is there, right? But last year, if you look at the way this team played, they had Ghosty, Crimp, Nasty, Joe Deceives. We all know that, right? And they finished top 4 at Champs and top 2 at EWC. Now, I love Crimp, Nasty, and Joe Deceives. I think they're all great players. But
Same.
Realistically, the talent that the Thieves just picked up is at a higher level, at least as of this moment. Do I think any of those guys can improve down the line and maybe be a top tier talent? Possibly. But
yeah.
For the time being and what they were capable to do last year, having even more talent, I think this team could be even better. You know, what do you think about that as the first kind of talking point here?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously anyone who's watched COD the last couple seasons can tell that we pretty much upgraded every position, right? So, sorry, I'm just randomly coughing.
You're good.
I saw some people in the offseason arguing like maybe Joe Deceives staying would have been better than Envoy. I personally, I mean, maybe I'm biased because as a Thieves fan, I obviously love Dill, and we saw what he did on the team that won champs. And we know what Envoy's capable of, like even before he was on Thieves. So I personally think Envoy is an upgrade over Joe Deceives at this point in time. So upgrading three of the 4 spots, and then like you said, building upon a top 4 and a top 2 to end out last season on the 2 biggest events. I don't see how this team doesn't get obviously better than they were last year and is easily a top 3 team with the talent to be top 1 by next season. So, I mean, everything you said, I 100% agree with. I think this team could surprise people, especially the people who, for some reason, think like Optic and FaZe are still a step ahead, which I guess we can give them benefit of the doubt because we saw them play together last year and they obviously won, stuck together. But I definitely think there's a bunch of people out there that are just doubting this Thieves team. I honestly, and maybe it's like a hot take, I honestly think it's like Optic and FaZe fans that are a little bit afraid.
Yeah.
That are the ones like kind of spewing that storyline on the timeline.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think, obviously, like you said, we've seen FaZe and Optic play together, so we kind of know what they'll be like. But with the Thieves, there's a lot of uncertainty knowing that they haven't actually teamed together yet. The closest thing that we've seen from this team so far has been, obviously, you have Scrap and Envoy who played together last year, so I don't think too much of that will change. But then, you know, they did the case on 2v2 tournament of Scrap and Hydra, and they went out and they won the tournament. Now, obviously, that's kind of more of a content tournament. I wouldn't say that's super, like, competitive. But you got to kind of see how those 2 guys might mesh together and, you know, the chemistry that they might have. But my next point, again, with Scrap and Hydra, is that they're considered top 2 players in the league from the last season. Like, you know, the Thieves didn't have anybody in the top 10 at all last year. And as we said, we're able to make top 4 at Champs and second at EWC, where you could argue that they had a chance to beat Optic at Champs, and they were 2 maps away from beating FaZe at EWC.
Yep.
So that, again, going back to the talent thing, that's a very big difference. And on top of that, if you look at just the event wins out of the players on the team, Ghosty's the only one to not get an event win last season. Hydra had an event win. Scrap and Envoy both had an event win. And, like, I just don't see how, if they were able to do it, not necessarily on their own, but as separate players, separate teams, how bringing that talent together will not lead to more championships or to more dominance than maybe what they showed in their respective teams last season.
Yeah, I think it's like Scrap, he's won an event both years he's been in the league. Envoy's won an event every year he's been in the league for the most part, I think. We're talking CDL era, obviously.
Yeah.
Ghosty's been to 3 finals. He's only been in the league for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
So that's obviously impressive. And then Hydra obviously has won an event. Has he won an event every year as well? Maybe they didn't win in Cold War, but
yeah, I think Cold War was probably the only one.
Pro-Am or kickoff, or they won the kickoff or the Pro-Am. But either way, all those guys were able to win, like you said, on their separate teams. And now you're adding them together into a roster that has more talent, I think, than their previous rosters, which is no disrespect to any of those guys. But like you said, Scrap and Hydra were top 3 in my mind, if, at the very least top 4 last year. And the year before, they were both top 3, right? Hydra was MVP. Abizi was probably second, and Scrap was third. So you take 2 of the top 3, top 4 players in the game that also play like different roles, right? Yep. It's not like you're trying to combine these guys that have the same role into a team just to stack the talent. Like, they play different, but it'll complement each other because they're both aggressive. They're both kill heavy. You pair them alongside with 2 guys that'll play their role really well, that'll give good comms, that both, Envoy, veteran in the league at this point.
Yep.
I just think the team's perfectly crafted. I think the talent is all there, and anything's possible, right? Like, we can't guarantee they're going to be great, but
yeah,
all signs point to it.
Yeah, and I mean too, like, obviously, talent wise, but you look at the fact that Envoy has a championship, he has a ring, and you have Hydra, who also has a ring, and really, like, this team is pretty young. Like, Envoy's the longest tenured player at this point on the roster, but we now have 2 people who have won champs. Scrap has been in the grand finals. Obviously didn't go very well, but he made it there, which is a big accomplishment. And Ghosty, again, is the only one that hasn't officially won anything, but he's still considered at least a top 5 AR in the game. Like,
yeah, at least definitely by the end of this season, I think everyone would say he was top 5.
And I think for me, the other thing is this roster, if you really kind of look at it, I feel like is very similar to the team that the Thieves had when they won champs. And I look at it from the sense that Ghosty is a lot like Octane in, say, like the comms department, the leadership department, and he also has the gun skill to back it up. Scrap is similar to, crazy to say this, but he's similar to Draza in the sense that he's a fast-paced flex who can get it. I mean, I would say he's still better than Draza, respectfully. But the play style is very similar, and I think having, as we saw before, under Shane as well, which we'll get to that, Draza and Octane paired together worked very well. I think Ghosty and Scrap being a similar play style will work together very well. And then obviously Envoy, he was on both teams, but this time he's older. I think he has a lot more experience. There's probably more to speak on, more to his game when it comes to leading. And then you have Hydra, who is a fast-paced sub that can just take over whenever he wants. And I feel like at the time during Vanguard, that's what Kenny was doing. So the difference, though, is I do think Kenny is a better flex player now that we've seen him kind of play that more consistently. And yet he was still able to dominate the sub role. I think Hydra, that is his role. So he's naturally going to be better at that than what Kenny was, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, you said it perfectly. I think on the AR side of things, I think not only do they have the comms and they have the slaying ability, and obviously Dan can fill gaps, he can play objective, but I
Yep.
also think maybe an underrated aspect of it is like there's not a traditional slow main AR on this team, right? You don't have a Skies, you don't
Yeah.
have an Insight, you don't have a Celium. Ghosty, though, we obviously saw the way he played on Optic. We saw the way he played last year on Thieves, which are two different type of AR roles.
Yeah.
But we know Dan can play fast when he needs to. So it's the perfect thing for this team. Because, I mean, if you look at FaZe, for example, when Celium picks up the pace a little bit, that's when FaZe is at their best. That's when they
Yep.
win events like Major 2 and EWC. So I think the combo of the ARs is perfect. And everything else you said about the SMGs is great. And plus, Scrap can use an SMG if there's a 3 SMG meta. And
Yep.
we saw Hydra pull out the MCW last year in MW3 as well. So I think we have the ability to flex if it's a 3-gun meta, no matter which way it goes. And I think the roles work great. I think, I don't know, man. I think it's like the perfectly crafted team on paper. We'll see how it actually plays out in game. But I think
Yeah.
given what you could have crafted, I didn't even think this was possible in the first place. But what was out there and just the way the
Seriously.
roles work, it's quite literally almost perfect.
Yeah, and I feel like too, speaking of like, roles and, being able to run multiple roles or the pace and everything, with what we're seeing so far in Black Ops 6 is a lot of these maps seem to be smaller. And naturally that's going to mean a higher pace. So if you can have multiple ARs who can either play a sub role or can just play a fast AR role, I think that's going to be a big advantage compared to most teams. Obviously, with as we said, Optic and FaZe, like they are capable of doing that. But I think with Celium, like you mentioned, he does typically play a slower role. And if maybe it's just a major by major situation where maybe one major he plays slow and maybe the next he plays fast. At that point, all it takes is the Thieves face off against him when he's having a slower kind of tournament, and Thieves are able to take advantage of that. I just think that when you combine all of the talent they have as well as the pace of play that they can play at with this new game that seems to be a smaller map heavy game, that the pace is going to be there and it's going to be a lot harder for other teams to kind of counteract that.
Yeah, it's Black Ops 6. I mean, at the time we're recording this, the game's been out in New Zealand for a little
Yeah.
bit, at this point, like almost 12 hours or something. So we still have to see exactly how it goes, and kickoff tournaments tonight are going to be great. But
Yeah.
I think it's great, man. I think also like 3 of the 4 guys on this team were literal hard carries on their teams last year. I mean, Ghosty was the guy on Thieves. Scrap was the guy on Ultra. Hydra was the guy on New York. And on top of that, the events the teams won last year, right? Toronto won Major 1. All 4 of them were playing great, right? Kleenex even won MVP. Hydra won Major. Was it Major 4? Right, it was Major 4 or Major 5?
I think so.
Major 4. I don't remember how many majors there were at this point last year. I don't know how.
Yeah, seriously.
And then Kismet was playing incredible. So those guys who are already super consistent, when they get help from their teammates, they won events.
Yep.
And now you're putting them on a team where 2 of the 4 were top 4 players. Dan I think for sure could be put in the top 10. And Envoy was a top 20 player. So like, you got to imagine anything's possible. Players could take a step back. They might be worse next year. You never know what could happen. But if they play up to the standard we know these players are capable of, they're going to be really, really good. And they're going to have, Scrap and Hydra in and of itself are going to be like, they could 2v4 bottom teams easily if Ghosty or Envoy or both are having a bad series.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me back to like the talent comparison of each team was, obviously with Ultra you had Scrap and Envoy already, but in my opinion, I think Hydra and Ghosty are better than Kleenex and Insight as a duo. I just think that's the case. I mean, it's hard.
Actually, it sounds kind of crazy at first, but I agree.
Because realistically, it's hard to say that any sub player is going to be better than Hydra. Like the best chance you have is like a Simp and maybe a BZ. Like those are your 2 only options. I feel like that are legit contenders to be better than Hydra.
You could throw Shotzzy in there.
You could, but I feel like it's a different play style.
So good against him. But yeah, okay, you're that's fair.
So it's like
that's fair.
He does something different. Like yes, he's good, but I feel like in some regard he does get knocked down a little bit because of the way he plays the role. Not that it's a bad way, it's just not the same. Like I feel like Shotzzy is definitely more like take space and kind of just force the other team to play on their heels. Whereas I feel like a lot of times Simp and Hydra are like just in your face, outgunning you. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing you can do about it. And then on top of that, Hydra has the smarts to say, I can still read these situations and play around that, forcing you to come to me, and I don't really have to do anything. Like that's kind of the vibe I get from Hydra. Um, but when you compare like the New York team, who obviously are champs winners, obviously now they don't have Priesta, they had Sib instead. But I mean, pretty similar roster. You have now Ghosty, Scrap, and Envoy to pair with Hydra. And I think Envoy is no worse than Kismet. I don't necessarily want to say he's like a lot better than Kismet, but I wouldn't say he's any worse than Kismet. So as a sub duo, that's already, a good start. And then you have Skies and Sib, who I think if you have Ghosty as the main AR, I think he's better than Skies.
Yeah.
And if you have Scrap as the flex, I think he's better than Sib. Now, Sib, you could argue, is maybe better than Ghosty, but if we're talking role for role directly, I think that situation, the Thieves would pair better than what the New York team did. And then obviously with the Thieves, Ghosty was the only guy. We already know that talent, respectfully, is probably higher than what the team they had last year was. For the time being, they could pop off. We don't know, but
you never know. I hope so.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so for them too. I mean, they're teams that we've seen so far. I don't think are bad teams by any means. I think honestly, C9 and Ultra will probably be like 4 and 5 maybe.
Yeah.
So I think they'll do well. They'll be a great team wherever they're at. But my last point that I have here is that sorry, that's the wrong thing. They played they're playing under Shane and Sender as the coaches. And Shane was there when they won champs. And if you go back and look at that Vanguard season, actually, they started off not so hot. They started off, it was, I believe, a top 8 finish was their first, was either their first or their second major finish. And then they placed top 6 within one of the first 2 majors as well. Their second major qualifiers, they went 0-5. And after that, going into the third major, they picked up Shane as an assistant coach. Next thing you know, they make their role switch, and now the team starts performing a little better. Then they go on to win back-to-back events, and the second one being champs. Then you have the next season where they break the champs curse. They didn't, maybe they didn't win as many tournaments, but there were some things that were changed throughout the CDL. Scrap was brought in. He played extremely well. And I think Hydra was kind of starting to hit his peak. I feel like in the season before, he was still kind of working some things out. That's why towards the end of the season, you saw New York starting to play well in the Vanguard season. And so having Shane as the head coach now, and having Sender, who has also won a championship, just like Shane, and has not only won a championship, but has coached Hydra and Envoy. Shane has now coached Ghosty and Envoy. So realistically, Scrap is the only one to have not been coached by anybody on this coaching staff, at least to my knowledge. And both of those guys have a high knowledge of ball. That's been proven. They have a high knowledge of ball. And this is probably the most talented roster that both coaches have ever worked with. So I just think that if Shane was able to do what he was with the roster that the Thieves had last year, you bring in this extra talent, these guys that are a little more developed than, the team was last year, and you have Shane leading the charge, and you have Sender right behind him, who Hydra praises a lot. I just think that they will be coached to perfection, and you can tell that these guys already want to win bad. Scrap has said that he wants nothing more than to win. And, you pair that with Hydra, who's the same way. Ghosty, the same way. He doesn't care about the stats. He just wants to win. Envoy doesn't care about the stats. He just wants to win. And now you have coaches who think the same way. I just don't see how they don't mesh well and come out hot.
Yeah, it's really the perfect storm. I mean, everything you said, right? Like all of these guys, for the most part, in some way, have been together in the past, worked together, played together, right? Between
Hmm.
all the coaches and the players. I mean, you got Scrap and Envoy coming over as a duo. You got Hydro and Sender coming over as a duo, and then Shane and Ghosty, who were together last year.
Yep.
It's just like it should all mesh really well. It just feels like the perfect storm for a team to just have all those different pieces fit together and not only
Hmm.
fit together, but also at the level of talent that there is on the team, right? Like it's one thing to have a team that has like the perfect roles. Maybe you have like one superstar and everyone else does their job perfectly. But it's another thing to have two superstars and Ghosty, a guy who could be a superstar,
Hmm.
and Envoy, a guy who at times in his career was a superstar, played like a superstar, and now is more of a gonna fill the gaps, do his role, make the right play,
Yep.
play the objective, carry the bomb. Like it's just a perfect storm. It really, really is. So it's a team that I can't wait to watch play. I wish the league was starting now, but
I
it
know.
looks like we're gonna have to wait for a little bit.
I'm seriously so excited for this season.
I hope they get to play together during these kickoff tournaments
Yeah,
because I would love to see them play as four.
I would love to see any form of like chemistry, like earlier before the season starts, just to kind of get an idea of how this team is gonna work together. It's funny because I've talked to my girlfriend about this when it comes to like regular sports. I feel like to the other thing that's kind of like making me think this team will be really like good is a lot of things had to align perfectly for this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's often how like certain teams win championships is a lot of things just line up exactly how they need to in order for everything to work out in their favor. And
Yeah.
with how much everybody was saying that this team was super unlikely, and then not only that, but when they went on and they did their podcast after it happened, they were talking about how like even just leading up to like the moment that they were in when they recorded the podcast, it was like there was still a lot of uncertainty
Yeah.
like going into that week before they officially signed everybody. Like there's just so much chaos, and then on top of that, you add that it's probably going to be a fast paced Treyarch game that they
Mm-hmm.
paired up to play on. Like it just seems like everything is kind of fitting together at the right time. So hopefully that really does mean something, and it's not just
Uh-huh.
this like feeling that I have. Maybe the stars really did align, and the thieves come out
Mm-hmm.
and take everything. I don't know. I know that's kind of been the joke with Envoy is this time we really take everything.
Mm-hmm.
But
I
yeah,
hope
man,
so.
I'm so excited for this team. I mean, I'm excited for the season in general. I think there's going to be a lot of great storylines. I think this team is gonna perform really well. As I said, I think they'll be better than what some people are expecting. And I think every tournament is going to be competitive. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the more we see about some of these lower teams, I'm even thinking that some of the lower team matchups are going to be competitive as well. So
Oh yeah.
I'm very excited for this season for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the top three battles are going to be great, but then it sucks it's not top four. Now it's top three. It's a little less competitive at the top, but the talent is even more spread at this point. So the bottom teams battling now is going to be even more interesting, I think, between C9, Ultra, Ravens, even the Rocker team, Young, maybe something to happen there. Falcons, no idea what to expect from them. That's exciting in and of itself, even if
Yeah.
they end up not being as good, like a lot of people think. So I think there's a lot of storylines and just like fun stuff that's going to happen, especially in the beginning of the year when the hype is really there. We'll see how it looks in the middle of the year. People might be tired of just watching like Phase Optic and Thieves win every match and
Yeah.
it just be a complete stomp. But I think it's going to be a great season. New game. The game looks like it's going to be fun. The maps, we'll have to see how those play out. But
Yeah.
overall, yeah, I mean, it's the stars align not only for the Thieves, but I think just for a really good CDL season. So I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining me today. I really
No
appreciate you
problem.
coming on and talking to me about the Thieves. I've said it before, but I can nerd out about the Thieves all day.
Oh, yeah.
So it was great to have somebody to discuss it with. And for all the people watching on YouTube, if you aren't subscribed to Jake, go follow him. Go subscribe to him. I will have all of his socials down below. So
Thank you.
just go ahead, give him a follow. He does a lot more content around the CDL as a whole. I obviously only cover the Thieves, so if you're missing Thieves, or if you're missing everything other than Thieves, go check out Jake. He's got it covered for you. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's episode. If you enjoyed, please hit that like and subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Peace.